In the heart of a forgotten village called Umuohia, surrounded by endless hills and red earth, lived a man named Obinna. He was the kind of man who smiled even when he had no reason to. His hut was small, his clothes patched with care, and his sandals made from old rubber tires. Yet every morning, before the sun rose, he would walk to his little farm, singing softly to the gods of dawn. He had lost his parents young, never married, and had no children. His only companion was his faith that one day his hard work and kindness would mean something. But kindness was often mistaken for weakness. Next to Obinna's small farm stood the estate of Okoro, a man whose wealth stretched across the village like a shadow. He owned cattle, land, and people's respect, though it was born out of fear, not love. Okoro despised Obinna. He would mock him openly. "Look at the great farmer of poverty," he would laugh. "The man who plants hope and harvests hunger." Yet Obinna never answered with anger. He would only say, "Okoro, one day a kind heart will be worth more than gold." Okoro would spit on the ground and walk away, his laughter echoing through the dusty air. One season, the clouds refused to rain. The earth cracked, and the crops turned to dust. The villagers begged the gods for mercy. Then one night, their prayers were answered, but in the most terrible way. Thunder tore across the sky. Rain fell like stones. The wind howled so fiercely that even trees bent in fear. A bolt of lightning struck Okoro's grand barn. The fire spread fast, swallowing his wealth, his crops, and his animals. In a single night, everything he had built turned to ashes. By dawn, Okoro was left with nothing. His servants fled, his friends turned away, and the villagers whispered, "Maybe the gods have punished his pride." Only one man dared approach him, Obinna. When he saw Okoro sitting in the ruins, drenched and trembling, he placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Come to my hut. The fire has taken your home, but not your life. That means there is still hope." Okoro stared at him, ashamed. "You would help me? After I laughed at you?" "Even enemies deserve compassion," Obinna replied. And so the poor man took in the rich man. Weeks passed. Okoro struggled with his new life, sleeping on a mat, eating one meal a day, and fetching water from the stream. He grew bitter. "You live like this every day?" he asked one night. "Yes," Obinna replied, "but I live with peace." "Peace doesn't fill the stomach," Okoro muttered. "Maybe not," Obinna smiled, "but greed can empty the soul." Then one cold night, as the moon hid behind thick clouds, someone knocked on the door. An old wanderer stood outside, a frail man with silver hair and a wooden staff. His robe was torn, and his eyes glowed faintly, like moonlight reflected in water. "Please," he said weakly, "I've walked for days. I need warmth and food." Okoro hissed, "We barely have enough for ourselves." But Obinna opened the door wide. "You will eat before me," he said kindly. He shared his last yam and gave up his mat so the old man could rest. By morning, the wanderer was gone, but on the small wooden table lay a box, smooth, ancient, and glowing faintly. A note was carved on its lid. "To the man whose heart shines brighter than gold, I leave this gift. What you give will return tenfold, but beware, greed turns blessings into curses." Inside was a golden seed. Obinna didn't hesitate. He went to his backyard, dug a small hole, and planted the seed. The next morning, the village woke to gasps and shouts. In the same spot, a giant tree of gold stood tall, its leaves shimmering like fire under sunrise. Birds sang around it, and the air smelled sweet like honey and rain. Each branch bore golden fruits that sparkled in the light. The people ran to Obinna's hut, bowing before him. They called him the Blessed One. But Obinna didn't keep the treasure for himself. He broke the golden fruits and melted them into coins, building wells, schools, and homes for the poor. For the first time, the village thrived, but not everyone rejoiced. Okoro watched from the shadows, jealous, bitter, consumed by the thought that the man he once mocked now had everything. One moonless night, Okoro crept to the golden tree. His heart pounded, his breath heavy. "If he got it from helping a stranger, then I deserve it too," he whispered. He plucked one golden fruit. Nothing happened. He smiled greedily and reached for another and another, but as his hand touched the third, A deep rumble shook the earth. The tree began to wither. Its glow faded. The fruits blackened. Okoro screamed as the roots wrapped around his legs like snakes, dragging him to the ground. The tree spoke in a voice that echoed across the night. Kindness multiplies. Greed destroys. When morning came, villagers found Okoro lying unconscious under the dead tree. The fruits had turned to ash, and his hands were burned black. He survived, but from that day, everything he touched turned to dust. His food, his money, even his land. He tried to rebuild, but nothing would grow in his fields. He could no longer eat or drink without it turning to sand in his mouth. Obinna wept when he saw what happened. He buried the remains of the golden tree and built a small shrine there, where people came to pray for humility. He forgave Okoro even after all that had happened. Years later, when Obinna passed away, the village mourned him like a king. They said the moment he died, a small sapling sprouted from the shrine, green, pure, and glowing faintly under the moonlight. Okoro lived on, alone and cursed, until one night he crawled to that shrine, his body frail and shaking. He placed a handful of ash, the last thing he could hold, before the tree and whispered, "Obinna, forgive me. I took your blessing and turned it into pain." As the wind blew, the sapling's leaves rustled softly, like a voice whispering, "You were forgiven long ago." The next morning, villagers found Okoro lifeless beneath the tree, a faint smile on his face. From that day, they say that anyone who gives with a clean heart prospers near the shrine. But those who come with greed, even for a handful of soil, find their hands covered in dust. And every full moon, the wind carries a whisper through trees. Kindness can make you rich, but greed will always make you cursed.